Hi guys, welcome to Amateur Chemistry.
So, as many of you know, chloroform has many uses, but it's mainly used as a lab solvent. Its molecule structurally resembles methane, but 3 hydrogens are replaced with chlorine atoms. Its other well-known use is as an anesthetic, which is commonly believed to render you unconscious as soon as you smell it, and this belief is often used in movies where people soak a piece of cloth in it and knock someone out by just touching it to the person's mouth. However, in reality, it doesn't work like that at all, and to make someone unconscious, they would need to breathe it in high concentration for a few minutes. It is also very carcinogenic and toxic. When exposed to light, fire or oxygen, it decomposes to phosgene, which is a really toxic nerve agent, so you must be really careful when it comes to storing it. So now that we know what chloroform is, let's talk about how we are going to make it. There are many ways to make chloroform, but the most common and easy one is to just add some acetone to a sodium perchlorate bleach. I already did that and posted a short about it, but now I want to make it more interesting and make the acetone myself using eggs. But why eggs? Well, firstly, eggs contain a lot of calcium carbonate in their shells, which I will use as a precursor to acetone. Also, other calcium carbonate rich things such as oyster shells or tams can be used, but eggs are the best meme of them all, so I went with using them. So, the first step in making our egg chloroform is to dissolve away the shell of an egg using some acetic acid, aka vinegar. This will produce our desired chemical called calcium acetate, which then will be used to make the acetone. You might think that it is some dark magic chemistry process, but you probably watch it in your school as something called the naked egg experiment. It is usually performed by placing an egg in some vinegar and leaving it overnight to then return to a very soft and jelly-like egg, which shall dissolve away and only a thin membrane is holding the egg together. So, to make the calcium acetate, I first need to smash some eggs. Separate and clean their shells, dry and crush them into pieces about 3 mm in diameter. Then I weighted about 60 grams of shells per 600 milliliters of 10% vinegar, so that there will be an excess of shells in the reaction to prevent any acetic acid to remain in the mixture. I also did it in 2 batches separately to get more of the acetate. When I added the crushed shells to the vinegar, they started to bubble because of all the CO2 gas they were producing and float in the jar, so it looked like an egg lava lamp. After leaving it for a bit, the mixture started to foam and I tried my best to prevent overflowing, but it ignored my efforts and started to foam like crazy. Also, in one of the jars, the shells just kept rising to the top, so I placed a plastic bag into the jar to lock them in place. Also, the mixtures turn yellow from many of their organic impurities, and as everyone knows, yellow is not the best color in chemistry. After about a day, the reaction was done, and my whole house smelled like vinegar and eggs. It wasn't too bad, but that was just a teaser of what was about to come. After dealing with the smell, I filtered both mixtures twice over my poor gravity cotton filter, which took about 8 hours only to later realize that I have a whole vacuum filtration setup ready to use. After filtering, the mixtures were no longer cloudy, but the yellow color was still there. I didn't want to filter them again, so I just proceeded to isolate the calcium acetate. To do that, I poured them onto a pan heated by an electric stove and slowly boiled all the water out. It took quite some time, but finally I was left with two almost full beakers of wet calcium acetate goop. I boiled them for a while longer and the goop was making some weird sounds. After that, I transferred it into a baking tray and left it in the oven under mild heat overnight. In the morning, I took it out of the oven and was left with a lot of hard chunks of impure calcium acetate. From the 120 grams of eggshells, I managed to get around 130 grams of calcium acetate, which was not ideal but good enough. So now that I had made the acetate, I wanted to show you a fun experiment you can do with it. First, you need to make a saturated solution of calcium acetate in water, which means that you need to add the acetate to water until no more of it dissolves. Then fill a beaker with a few milliliters of some sort of alcohol. Here I went with ethanol, but you can also use isopropanol or methanol. If you then add the solution of calcium acetate to the alcohol, it will instantly form a nice looking jelly, which you can then ignite and even try to throw some fireballs made out of it. The process of making the jelly is not a reaction, but just a dissolvement of calcium acetate in alcohol, which just so happens to create a flammable jelly. The jelly is flammable not only because it's partially made of alcohol, but also because when the calcium acetate decomposes under heat, it releases acetone, which is also very flammable. and that reaction of releasing acetone is why this whole project exists. So, to get the acetone out of the calcium acetate, I first assembled a small distillation apparatus with heating from the electric stove. I also lost my water pump, so I proceeded with using air cooling. In conclusion, this setup wasn't ideal, but in the end, it managed to do its job. So, to start the distillation, I first loaded the flask with a random amount of calcium acetate and started heating it. At first, everything looked okay, and some dirty water started coming over, but then I noticed a very intense smell that resembled cigarette smoke. I don't know how I transformed eggs into a cigarette extract, but after an hour distillation, my whole house smelled like someone made a cigarette smoking party. After about 2 hours, the dirty water stopped coming over and the distillation slowed down, so I turned the heat off, took out the acetate, which now was much more fluffy than before, put it into a plastic bag and started hammering it to turn it into a powder. After that was done, I put it back in the flask, cranked up the heating, covered the flask in aluminum foil for insulation, and hoped for the acetone to start distilling. I also noticed all of the apparatus was covered in egg tar, which smelled awfully. Like, I don't know what caused the smell, but oh god, it was bad. After a few more hours, I finally saw some acetone coming over, and after stopping the distillation, I was left with about half a flask of stinky acetone. Then I sealed the acetone flask with a DIY stopper and tried to clean the dirty glassware, but the tar just won't come off. After cleaning it way longer than I'd like, it is still covered in a black stain. I guess that's what you get when you work with eggs. So, after finally making the acetone, it was time for the Chloroform. To make it, I first got my giant container of 15% sodium perchlorate bleach and poured some of it into a jar. I also did this outside, because it is impossible not to spill anything. After that, I put the jar into the fridge and cooled it to about 5 degrees Celsius. Then I added about 200 ml of water to it to dilute it and did the same with acetone. I got everything outside in case something goes wrong and proceeded to add the diluted acetone into the bleach in small portions while stirring. After adding about half of the acetone, I stopped the addition because the mixture started to get really hot. After leaving it for a while to cool, I came back and saw an oily layer at the bottom of the jar. To separate it from the rest of the mixture, I poured the upper layer into another jar and was left with a few millimeters of impure chloroform. I could distill it, but I didn't want to make my house stink again, and I just generally wanted to avoid working with this cancer juice. To store it, I poured it into a small bottle and added some ethanol to prevent it from releasing phosgene. I also wrapped it in aluminum foil to prevent it from light. So, there you have it. Proof of concept that you can make the chloroform with eggs using simple chemistry. I really wouldn't recommend it because it is far easier to just buy the chloroform than make it yourself and to make your whole workspace stink. For those who made it that far, I just want to say thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. I put a ton of effort into this video and I really hope you appreciate it. See you in the next one.